So welcome to part 2. This is the final part of the whole series, and it's the good bit. It's where we're going to do all of our grinding, showcase all the nice monster infrequents. So we left off in Scandia. We're going to take this boat. We're in this unpronounceable village now. You're going to want to get that quest to the left. It rewards 2 skill points. And this is also where we turn in that scythe that we got, the Cornwith Scythe. Now that thing's been eating up your inventory space for the last hour, so it feels good to finally get rid of it. And we're just going to start off right away. So these Ichthyans, great place to farm monster infrequents. Particularly for 2 characters, I think a Conqueror really benefits from farming these things. I'll put it on screen, but they have a chance at dropping the Ichthyan Shell Shield. Now this thing is a great offensive shield. Notice that the stats on it, the native stats, the shield stats, are pretty similar to the Enhenyar shield that I showed off last video. Now these stats are the best you're going to see on any shield in normal mode, and what I'm referring to is the 24% block, the blocked damage, and the physical damage that's part of the shield, not necessarily the stats. The stats are good too, but what makes this so good is it's a little bit easier to farm than the Enhenyar shield, so you can really tailor those affixes the way you want them. And it provides cold res, so that saves you a swap ring. Once you get into Epic, you start seeing rings that give 2 resistances, so you can get like a fire lightning plus health. And you can use your other ring slot for something else entirely, which is pretty nice. And it reduces freeze and petrify. You know, that stuff is good. So it's easily farmable and great. The second item I wanted to show off that can drop here is a pretty unique bow. So I talked about this in Act 2 for a little bit, but I think the Day of the Bow is kind of up and done. My end vision for this character, my Dragon Hunter, is actually using a bow. But that's late days. But I know there's still people who don't like the range on throwing weapons. They really like the idea of using a bow and the look of it and everything. So I recommend this Ichthyan Stinger. The reason I like this bow so much is it has a high pierce ratio already, 33%, and it has a 20% chance of 200% increased pierce ratio. So we talked about in last video the differences between elemental conversion and pierce conversion, which is always called pierce ratio. It'd be interesting to see how this increased pierce ratio works. I suspect because of the way the math is looking, 33% plus 200, that would equal 100. I suspect that it's just taking you from 33% to a chance of 100% and not overcapping your pierce such that, you're doing 300% of the damage you normally would or whatever. I don't think it works like that. But still, there's not a huge amount of options for bows that do pierce damage, and you want to scale pierce just because in Anniversary they changed the way that pierce works with intellect and strength. So it used to be the case before Anniversary that you would scale strength. You would increase your strength and you would scale pierce damage at a certain pierce ratio. Nowadays, it's more lucrative to use dexterity to scale your damage instead of strength. And dexterity also increases your pierce damage by a certain percentage. So it's kind of tempting to fully scale dexterity, not just to equip items or to get DA, but for damage. So for instance, pierce damage, there's no items in this game that fully convert pierce, and blade honing only works on blades, they don't work on bows. So this is probably going to be your best bet, especially if it rolls with some nice affixes, for getting a pierce damage type bow. It's a pretty interesting one that could totally define a character build. So these Ancestral lands, you're going to find a couple enemy types here. I don't think it's worth killing any of them, frankly. We're going to find some of these unique Deviger guys in the next dungeon. And Yeren, who kills Yeren? No one kills Yeren. Just leave him alone. Okay, it looks like I'm killing the Yeren, but it's usually not worth it too. I think in subsequent playthroughs I'm just going to run through this entire area. And that's what I recommend. But these Deviger are very, very interesting, mostly because they drop a wide variety of monster infrequents. Now most of them drop from the live versions, which we'll see pretty soon in the dungeon. And they're strength-based gear. When I first saw them, I facepalmed because we don't really need more strength support, especially in Monster Infrequent. But after a while, I started finding some intellect stuff. It's more rare. Okay, but I'm going to post the strength stuff. It's called the Master Forge gear. And what it gives is, of course, less damage from constructs and devices, but also Ellie res, and that scales up every difficulty. It's a nice base armor, you could tailor the affix, and it's very easy to farm. You just take the waypoint to, I can't remember what it's called, the Dark Portal or something like that, or you just fountain farm it. And you can get a ton of these things. Like I said, in Act 5, drop rates are awesome. So that means you can really easily tailor your affixes. I mean, there's no excuse to not walk away from the Deviger area before you start reaching Yggdrasil and all those places with a full set of Master Forge gear. I really recommend it for a strength user. If you're an intellect user, you still have an option with these Devigers, and it's a really, really nice item. It's called the Master Seer Robe. The thing about it is it's much harder to get. There's much, much fewer of those mages. That means much less chances of it dropping. But it's the same thing as the other one, except that it also gives percentage elemental damage. Great for my character, for instance. But look at the armor on it. The armor is very comparable to the strength version. And the requirements, just 122 dex, easy, and 257 int, also very easy. So that's definitely something to keep an eye out for. A little bit harder to get, though. Another thing that's for my character that I would like to farm is the Diverger Runestones. So you can see this thing does physical damage as its base damage, but that's okay, we can convert it. It also adds flat elemental. It gives +1 to magical charge, yeah, that'll save a little bit. By the way, if you overcap beyond 4 on your abilities, that still means you get an extra skill slot because you can just take 1 out of it. So say you get +6 on your magical charge. Just take 2 off of your maximum magical charge and you'll still get 20 out of 10. Or I'm sorry, 20 out of 16. So that's still useful no matter what. And I could tailor that once again. I could get some good affixes, maybe of ice or of fire, and then a nice prefix on it. And then enchant it. So I get a lot of value out of that. So this boss isn't really worth talking about. I mean, you can see he obviously does poison and fire damage. It's not significant. Even his auto attack damage isn't significant, which is very, very surprising. You'd think by looking at him that you'd have to just run away if he got near you, but nope. He's a bit impotent. So once he dies, the 2 little dudes jump off of him, which is a nice surprise. So the mage boss can drop the intellect version of the Master Forge gear. I've never seen him drop it. And frankly, I tried farming this guy for a while and didn't really get a whole lot of anything. Looks like I did get a blue item this run. And you're going to want to head into these mines. So that quest we picked up in the Unpronounceable Village is for the skill points, and it wants us to grab 2 of these tablets. The first one is in this cave, the second one is in the cave underneath the forge area, which is a very obvious area. We'll run into it in a bit. So there it is, grab it, and you're ready to go back and continue on. Anyway, back to those Diverger Runestones. They have an average speed. So eventually I'm going to get to my 141%, and it's pretty easy on this character because I'll be using primal magma, which we talked about last episode, and that thing has a completion bonus that gives a huge amount of attack speed, much more than normal. I think on normal mode it's 25%. You better buy some of our stock.
You'd better buy some of our stock.
On normal mode, it's like 25%. On legendary, it's 35, 45, I don't know. It's something huge. So it's very easy to get that if you're dual-wielding throwing weapons. So you're going to have to move down in speed eventually. And you want to do that. You'll get more damage that way. So in this area is a quest chain. It's in order to unlock the legendary reforging system. That's a new feature of Ragnarok. I don't recommend getting 1 item and turning it in, and then continuing on the quest chain, get another item, turning it in. That's too much backtracking. Just don't even bother talking to them. I'm going to show you where to get all the quest items. One of them is the Meat of Poetry. Another one is the Meat of, I don't know, it's in Asgard. And the third one is the Black Steel Ingot at the end game. Get all 3 of those. You don't need to take the quests in order to find them. You just turn them all in at once. So this is that other cave I was talking about. It's got the second tablet in it. And I mentioned this last video, but if you come across a chest, a mystic chest, go out of your way to pick it up. In this act, you have a higher probability of getting the Ragnarok specific gear. And a lot of that stuff is a lot more powerful than typical gear you would find. It's overpowered, frankly. In this Cavern of the Fungoids, you're going to want to go south and wrap around. It's the quickest way to get to the mini-boss. Now, he does poison damage. When I tested this, it seemed to only be poison damage. I was curious if part of it was vitality, because it's purple-ish. You can see there that shout. But it seemed when I was toggling my vitality resist, I didn't see any difference in damage. Now that could be a thing with normal mode, maybe the contribution is very small with vitality. But I suspect he just does poison damage. He also has a sleep, it's very easy to dodge the sleep. I think it's part of that breath attack. So just don't stand on the landmines and kind of attack him. His slam is not as difficult as the Troll King's slam. You don't need to obsess over dodging it. So you might have saw on screen that I found that guy who gave the Lupin Claw formula. So I'm going to turn in my 3 Lupin Claws here. And it's actually at this point that I recommend going back to Unpronounceable Village, just because you have both runestones and you have the necklace. I wouldn't go back until you have all of those things. And the way you go back, since there's no portal, is by heading to Scandia and taking the boat. It's kind of a backwards, annoying way to get there, but you only have to do it once. And you have that carrot, which is the skill point quest, as sort of an incentive.
What?
There you go. I don't know why this lady required a necklace with 3 Lupin Claws. It must be a local thing.
Thank you,
But you're free to give it to any one of those 2 brothers. Now, I've done it to both of them in different playthroughs, and I didn't really notice much of a difference in stock. Apparently, one of them is supposed to sell more intellect sort of gear, and the other one is supposed to sell more strength gear, kind of like the difference between a blacksmith and an arcanist.
Ha!
Anyway, like I said, don't bother getting the quest from those guys. We'll definitely resolve that later, and we'll also talk about how that feature works a little bit later. I had neglected this leveling up all my skill points. I don't know how I let that be for so long. I guess I was just going on autopilot. Anyway, we're underground now, and we're gonna head towards Asgard. That's kind of where this path leads. I wouldn't attack those golems. When they settle down, they put either a reflect or a retaliate. I'm not sure which one it is. Either way, they take a lot less damage, and it makes them too annoying to kill, frankly. So I've had some struggles with this branch. By the way, anything tagged Yggdrasil can drop Ader, which is a nice charm. They can also drop their other stuff that they normally drop, like Venom Sac, blah blah blah. But my problem with this branch is I have a hard time hitting things. You can see I'm sort of just throwing my stuff into the air, and it's not necessarily because of the enemy types. I think it's because of the geography here. There's some funky stuff going on with the x-axis, and as you probably know, this game behaves oddly with projectiles and differing x-axis areas. Because there's kind of this bend in the branch. It's not a totally flat location. I found that I'm totally fine at the very start hitting things, and towards the end I can hit things as well, but in the middle of the branch I can't hit anything. It could be one of these spiders, you clearly see I'm hitting him just fine. If he's in the middle of the branch, wouldn't be able to hit him. Don't know why, so I just run through it. So here in Asgard you can actually grind these elf ladies. They do drop some good stuff. Let me see if I can find it in my list. There it is, the Tunic of Alfheim. It's a rare chest piece, and it adds 1 to nature mastery skills. The only reason I bring this one up, because those guys are annoying to farm, is because it gives skills in nature mastery. Now, nature mastery, mostly if you're playing that, you're playing a summoner, and it's notorious for being hungry for skill points. So that might be a good option for you, if you want to get rid of the tyranny of Stonebinder's Cuffs or something like that. And this is my favorite place in the entire act, really in the entire game, to grind. There's a huge variety of monster infrequents. Many of them are very good. I'm going to put all my favorite ones up here. Just know that the ones I'm going to show you on the screen aren't even half of the ones that drop. So there's 2 different types of units. One are the Inherior human dudes, and one is the Valkyrie. Now we'll talk about the Valkyrie in a bit. First, these Inherior, they can drop this helmet, the Helm of Valhalla. And I bring this one up because it's an alternative to the hollowed helmet. So if you can't be bothered to vendor farm for a hollowed helm, but you kind of miss not having that big chunk of vitality resist, well, this is something you can farm here and just keep as a swap helmet for those vitality fights. Another good one is the chest piece, the Harness of Valhalla. By the way, this comes in a whole set. This gives bleeding resist, so it's one of those things, again, you don't want to have all the time, but you just want to swap to it every now and then. So it's not like Cerberus, where you can just put on something of the Glade. Those boar bosses that do bleed damage are usually magical, and it's hard to get % less damage from magical, so having a swap chest piece that protects you from bleed is a nice option. Those are both strength pieces, by the way, and so is this one. I've mentioned it a few times, the Arm Guards of Valhalla. It gives slow resistance. That's a very, very rare and useful thing, especially for attack-based builds. Now, this thing uses strength. You need strength in order to equip it, so it's best probably for a Conqueror or a Warfare-type character, but you'll find, especially in Epic and Legendary, that slow res is just awful. If you combine this one, especially the Legendary version, this is the normal version, with 1 Relic of Ajax, that'll take care of all your slow res needs. So you can see I'm kind of going out of my way killing these guys. I ran through them, actually, on my first couple playthroughs. I was actually pretty frustrated with the second part of this act. It seemed like it was another Act 5 where nothing was worth fighting. But I stopped and killed them for a while just out of curiosity, and quickly I started to see the value in killing them. They just drop so many items. They drop so many items that it's so good to farm this place, and because of that you get a lot of experience. So, I mean, you can use that Spriggan area I said in the last video to farm experience. But really, I would just recommend farming here. It doesn't matter if your character can really use any of this stuff. I mean, ideally, if you're coming back to the game after a hiatus or you've never played before, your first character should actually be leveled in tandem with another character. That way you can trade each other gear. That's the ideal way to play this game if you always want to keep up on your gear. It's the same way in Grim Dawn, by the way. You don't just level one character, then another character. Of course, that's up to you, but I'm just saying you can farm this gear on a character that doesn't need any of it, and just give it to your next character or another character you might be planning, or ideally a character you're playing in tandem. So let's talk about these Valkyries then. I claimed in the last video that the Valkyrie boots are going to be the new Stonebinder's cuffs. Now, that's not necessarily true. That would only be true if the +1 to all skills turned into +2 in Epic and +3 in Legendary. But it's rare enough to find farmable boots that give plus skills. I'm not sure if the Epic and Legendary versions are bugged. They seem to get less and less movement speed instead of more and more. But you can see these are the native stats on it. It's just 7 health regenerated per second, +1 to skills, and 17 movement speed. What makes them especially good, though, is they require intellect. However, they have the armor of a strength piece of gear. 160 armor, that's no joke. And that scales into epic and legendary as well. Those versions also give high armor. And of course, they can roll a prefix, a suffix, and you can enchant them. So this is ideal for summoners, since you can enchant it with a Ponus charm. I mentioned that last video, has a completion bonus, very beneficial for pet users. Or you can just put Hermes sandals on them if you want to double up on that movement speed. You can also just put an Ajax or one of the new, what is it called? Dragon's Blood, I think. It's a really cool charm, actually. It gives a percentage chance of 100% physical mitigation. So it starts at 10, but I think the legendary version is 20% chance at completely negating a physical hit. Now, considering that physical is the most important damage type in this entire game, the more of those you get, the better odds you have at just totally mitigating that damage altogether. Or if you're a dexterity scaling class, you can put a Sigurd's on it. You know, there's a lot of different options for enchanting with these things, and it's on a very, very good and farmable base. Now, here's the thing. They tend to be extremely rare. I found 3 of them, but I farmed this thing for an hour using my increased speed, and I only found 1 of them in an hour. That's about on par with the worst case scenario on Stonebinder's Cuffs in terms of my personal average. Now, I haven't optimized the run yet. I'm going to show off the run here pretty soon after I kill the boss of this area. But I suspect it's going to be the hairiest and the most difficult farm to do. And it's unfortunate, kind of, because it's, well, maybe it is fortunate for those of you who like grinding. But it's because it's probably the most coveted item for any character. The caveat being that it doesn't require strength, it requires int. So things like a Conqueror, I probably wouldn't farm this on a Conqueror. It's never worth it to get int on a Conqueror, frankly. But it's an extremely good item. So this place is chock full of mystic chests. You have a couple options for farming the Valkyries. You can either go south towards the way we came in, where those elves were prancing around, or you can go north through this area. I prefer to go north through this area just because there's a higher density of those mystic chests. And again, mystic chests are very good in this difficulty. Or I'm sorry, in this act. So I want as many of them as I could get. Remember, this grinding is all about gearing up. So if you're looking for Valk boots, but instead you find a really good pair of boots that are epic or legendary in a chest, well, that just saved you a bunch of time. You can also find a lot of other stuff, too. I think I found a really good blue weapon, maybe, in one of my farming sessions. Fafnir's Bite. So you don't want to neglect the chests. Now with this upcoming boss, it's a bit of a weird boss. I don't really understand it, but once you rescue this girl, if you run ahead of her, you have to fight that boss alone, and it's extremely difficult. But if you let her run in front of you and engage them, she tanks all 3 of the bosses for you. You don't take a bit of damage, and you can just sit there and tunnel into them. So I don't know if that's intended, but this boss is like literally nothing. You don't have to prepare for it at all. You can see I'm attacking Freya, and she's dead. I got revenge there for her calling me, what did she call me? Revenge for her calling me a foreigner earlier.
Watch out.
I also kill her lover, just to rub it in.
What? Loki.
And Woden, I think, is Odin. You know, this isn't Thor, the Marvel movie, so it's not very flashy Norse mythology. I think it's trying to take it a bit more
Welcome to the fifth realm.
I was about to use the
hope you
word
brought
seriously,
something
but I don't know if
interesting
that's
with
the
you.
word for it
Your
either. It's
entrance
just
is
different.
surely-
I think Wodan is Odin. A lot of the other characters are probably familiar. Again, I'm not a lore guy. But anyway, another good thing about this farm is you get so many monster infrequents, and those are green items technically. Those tend to sell close to the gold cap, or above the gold cap. That means you're going to get a ton of items, and they're usually like bows and swords and things. What's nice about that is that they take up vertical slots, like 3 or 4 of them, and they fit very nicely in your inventory. So it's very inventory efficient to farm this area. You'll get a ton of money from it. You barely ever have to stop off to sell things. It's just a really great farming spot.
As Woden wills it.
This area also has all the other shenanigans. So you can follow Wodan, but instead I'm going to take this shrine. And this is the shrine I used to grind with. So I'm going to show that off here. So you start by going west. There's always a Valkyrie in this area. In fact, there's 2 Valkyrie spawn points. They'll either spawn with 1 Valkyrie or 2 Valkyries. So there could be a total of 4 Valkyries there. I go immediately up these stairs, and there's always either 1 or 2 Valkyries here. Valkyries tend to spawn, if they do spawn, in either 1 or 2 per spawn location, I found. In this area, there's always 1 or 2 Valkyries, and then in the middle of the room, again, 1 or 2 Valkyries. Really, your range on how many you can kill in one of these runs, it can go up to like 20, 24, some ridiculous number of Valkyries. And this can be a pretty dangerous grind. You can see I'm doing this with a little bit more power than I had before. I'm level 40 now. I had been doing this grind for a while. You can see I'm kind of going around to those chests. Now, those chests can be mimics, so if you're a little bit weak, you don't want to train a bunch of dudes into a mimic chest and get yourself killed. But I continue on, and you want to check back every now and then. Sometimes the physics engine can make those boots bounce a little bit, or any item. And so the name won't appear for a little while. You don't want to miss a pair of Valk boots because they're very, very rare. You can see just how many mystic chests there are here. It's crazy. And I debated stopping here, stopping the farm spot here. My perception's a little bit skewed by the fact that I'm running this on a faster than normal. I'm using an outside program to speed it up. So it might be disingenuous to say that it's worth going here because your experience won't be as quick as my experience. So it might be better to stop in that other room. But I took it a little bit further. And you can see the yields I got here. So I got those nice bracers. I got a pair of Valk boots. They're not great, but it's better than nothing. And I got this Fafnir's Bite I mentioned earlier. Very nice item. Came from a chest. So now you're ready to move on. And you're going to the Bifrost Bridge, I guess. This is the Bifrost. And the rest of this act is really a run-through. So you talk to Heimdall.
Need to explain.
Hurry, Heimdall, your people need you. Look at that ridiculous animation. That's so funny. Sabotage. This whole thing is just hilarious. Now he blows this horn all Gimli. I don't understand what's going on. Norse things. Oh, that trickster Loki. So I just kind of run through this. Like I said, the rest of the act is like this. Are these Jotun worth killing? No, they're not worth killing. They take too much to kill. They have a lot of health. Each and every one of them has this horrible stun thing. So it's hard even to gather them up and try to AoE them down. It's too dangerous to do that. So the game almost forces you to fight them one by one, which is just awful, you know. What do you think a player is going to do when they encounter something like that? You can fight them for fun, of course. Part of my fun, so I guess I should say this, part of the way I derive fun is by being efficient in aRPGs. But I totally know that there's people who just don't care about that stuff. So you can kill these guys. I'm sure they do something. They give experience. They actually don't give very good experience. Kill them for fun if you want to. But I just run. I run through this whole area, and I fight whoever their boss is. Thrym, I think his name is. His name is probably Thrym. And he's actually a pretty cool boss. I like him a lot. So here he is. What you want to do is stay close to him. He does this huge AoE, that big frost thing. So if you're far away from him, that'll hit you, and then he'll follow it up with something else. Also, you want to watch him for when he stomps on the ground. When he does that, something will appear right under you, and it'll freeze you. So just step away when you see him stomp. And at 50%, he gets his battle axe out. Now, it looked like he kind of bugged out here. He didn't seem to want to fight. He gave up. But it's a cool fight. Usually when he transitions like that, he starts fighting right away, and there's a noticeable damage increase. So it's a pretty nice moment. But of course his damage is physical, and it's also cold damage.
Over here, let a human.
I don't know if there's any reason that you should let her out. I don't know if she's good or if she's bad. I mean, Loki seems to trick you, quote unquote, like 3 times in this act. So I don't know if that's her or the real one, you know, lore stuff. It never seemed to impact my game if I talk to her or not. So surprisingly, this is also a run through. Now you're going to see me kill a little bit more than usual. That's because this character is more powerful than any character I've had up to this point. And so it feels nice and liberating to just destroy those werewolf things. They're pretty dangerous. But all I'm going to do is I'm going to keep an eye on the mini-map just so I know where I'm going. You want to go east. And by the way, we're looking for the mead of poetry at this point. After you kill Thrym, that's what should be on your mind. Find the mead of poetry. And it's in the southwest portion of this horrible craggy area. So dodge all these spells, dodge all the slams. If you get overrun by wolves, kill them. Don't keep dragging them because they won't leash. They're very fast. I was testing these guys to see if they were like Thrym, and it looks like they are like Thrym. They do a stomp on the ground, and it creates something right underneath you. Now that has an extremely long range, that stomp attack. So they can off-screen stomp, and then something will appear underneath you and freeze you, and you can't even see them. It's from so far away. So obviously that's very dangerous. They kind of buffed this lady up. At least they buffed up her entourage. It used to just be her, but now they gave her 2 Jotuns. And again, Jotuns are pretty tough, so even with this strong character, I decided to body pull them. I believe the damage she does is vitality and maybe lightning. I've never tried mitigating her damage though, so I'm not 100% on that. So there it is, the mead of poetry. It's in that goo. And now we're going to continue on. The next thing we have to do is to kill Mimer. Actually, you know, the next thing you should do is to look for the portal to Jotunheim. So as you're going north here, you'll start to see it on your mini-map. You can see it to my west. So I need to find a way down there. It's not a critical portal to get, but I don't like hitting the M button and having one of those things grayed out like I'm missing it. It feels bad. Plus, if you ever want to come back and look for scrolls or anything like that, vendor farming, you want as many of these things open as you can get. So there it is.
What am I doing?
I mean, I guess if you're...
What does it look like? I bet you didn't know that we Verger are respected for our craft in all 9 realms. And found a way to travel anywhere at our leisure. Well, except Asgard. Odin put a stop to
That guy had a lot to say. What I was about to say is, if you're really crazy, if you have something wrong with your brain and you want to find Mimer and farm him, as in kill him more than once, why would you do that?
We come from Ymir.
Yeah, not the gods. I don't know why you'd want to do that. I have 0 clue, but if you wanted to do that, this would probably be the portal to do it. You can shrine farm him, I suppose. Mimer is really just annoying. even if you figure out how to fight him, it still doesn't make it any better. It's kind of what you suspect he's doing all along, the trick. So it's not like some sort of magic thing. It's like, you know, an aha moment that all of a sudden makes it easier. No, you just kind of understand that what you suspected was true. That's that's the trick. So I'll explain once we get there, of course. Now there's a couple more of these monsters that can drop Hater, I think, around. These Jotun dominate the scene. They do a ton of damage. And they're very fast. Anything that's very fast will have trouble leashing. Unless they gave them a specific leash range. Those werewolves are definitely included in that. You don't want to bring 2 werewolves to another pack of 2 werewolves. They're going to follow you all the way to Mimer. So just be aware of that. Kill them one by one if you can. Again, you're not crazy, so you're not going to come back here a second time. That means you just have to go about this thing once. So here's Mimer's Maze. There's a couple things to talk about here. One, every mob is annoying. These automatoid guys, these constructs, they can all do a electrocute stun ability. It's extremely deadly. There it is. They could do it back to back to back to back, and I've been killed that way, in fact. I overpulled in this area. I had like 20 of those guys and just died. I never left the stun, and I had stun res too. Another annoying guy are these crystal golems. Now, if you can kill them before they do their little reflect thing, great. If you can't, just move on. They don't do anything else. And then there are these, whatever, these caster guys. They do a purge and a mana drain. When you kill them, it's a PB AoE. So if you're a melee character, you know, sorry about that. But if you're a ranged character, just stay out of range. When they explode, they won't strip your buffs. I used to think that they stripped them on their own volition, so I would attack them first. But they don't. They do it when they die. That means you're free to kill them last. You might also encounter a doppelganger. It's just a copy of yourself. Now, I've read online that doppelgangers can drop the items that you're wielding. I don't know any of the parameters of how that works. I've never seen it happen myself, and I've killed many doppelgangers. But I'll keep that illusion alive. It may be true for all I know. I'm hoping one of these days I kill a doppelganger and he drops another Valkyrie boots. That'd be awesome. Anyway, they can be pretty dangerous, actually. They mimic your spells and your abilities, I believe. I want to do a lot of testing with the doppelgangers, actually, but who wants to come here to Mimer's Maze? Nobody. So how do you fight Mimer? He has a couple of abilities. His projectiles are cold and vit, like the Act 3, the Terracotta boss, that's it. And he also does a teleport where he swaps positions with you. And that does lightning damage instantly, but you also have a chance of taking incidental lightning damage for his PB AoE.
Let's play.
Aside from that, you can see I stopped here. The first one to spin after he splits is the real Mimer, so you have to watch. That's the trick. It's the first one that spins. And if he's got a yellow shield, he'll take more damage. That's Mimer. There's really nothing more to talk about. It seems like a chaotic fight, but really it's just the projectile, that's Cold Vit. The swap placement thing, so if he's got copies, they're all going to try to swap places with you. He does it randomly. It'll happen more often if he's got copies out. And it makes it hard for you to tell which one's the real one, because of course you've lost eye contact. So in that case, I would just kind of wait around for him to do another spin transition. And then you know the real one and you fight him again. He can either take a long time or he'll be as quick as you saw there. This character's very strong, so he was squashed very fast. That was actually very nice. I was happy about that because I do not like fighting Mimer. So now we're in the branch of Yggdrasil. By the way, you can't get in here without fighting Mimer. So, tough cookies. And here we're going to fight the, I would say, the most disappointing boss, Nidhogg. Now, Nidhogg's supposed to be this awesome, you know, horrible lizard thing, or dragon. But he's just kind of weak. I mean, he does this poison cloud ability. It's pretty significant damage. Remember, I am poison capped right now. His most noticeable ability, though, is you probably saw it, is when he summons zombies, if they close in on you and make contact with you, they explode and deal a lot of vitality damage. Likewise, if you kill them when they're near you, they'll explode and do a lot of vitality damage. That's the thing that'll kill you the fastest, and if you're not aware of that mechanic, you might die on Nidhogg. But if you're aware of it, there's really nothing he can do to kill you. I mean, he barely does any physical damage. And bosses, especially a boss that size, I think should do a lot more physical damage. So I do think he needs a buff. And in fact, I think most bosses need a buff, one way or another. Maybe not Mimer. I think they buffed the last boss, which is our next stop. His name is Surtur. But I don't think even with the buff that he's all that. Now this is another great farming location. What we're farming here is primal magma. I've shown it off a couple times. I have a very high opinion of it. Maybe it's because I've been playing a lot of Rune Masters. But I like to tailor the affixes, so if you want the extra attack speed, you're in luck, because it's a huge bonus, and it's the most common completion bonus. If you don't need the attack speed, well, there's two options. You can get flat fizz, or you can get flat fire as the completion bonus. It's likely if you're playing this character, or a character that wants primal magma, that you're after the flat fire. But if you get the flat fizz, I'm pretty sure added flat does convert with transmutation. I'm pretty sure, not 100%. You might want to test that yourself. It's very hard to test those things. That's why I'm not sure. It's not that I was too lazy to test it. It's that it's hard to get definite conclusions out of your testing because we just lack the tools. These salamanders, by the way, you just saw me kill them. They have a shotgun sort of fire physical projectile attack. They can easily kill you, especially since they always come in pairs. If you run into the middle of those guys as a melee and you just start swinging at them, you'll die before you even know what happened to you. So just be cautious, be aware that they do that. Maybe try to lure them away one by one, something like that. Stun them. That's usually a good option for melee users. But it's these Jotun, it's the fire guys, the fire elementals, you'll see them later, and the salamanders that can drop primal magma. All the demons drop demon's blood. These Jotun also drop a pretty cool piece of gear. It's called the black steel plate. That's the chest piece. They actually drop a full set of them, so there's a helmet, boots, and bracers too. But what the chest piece does is it adds one to all skills in Earth Mastery and Pierce Resist. I love Pierce Resist on chest pieces. It's my favorite thing to swap for Pierce Res. And conceivably, you can get a nice prefix that gives you even more Pierce Res on top of that. I'm not sure what the pool of available affixes is for these monster infrequents. I've yet to explore that much. But, you know, you can get a prefix and a suffix, and it's pretty good. In general, the Black Steel Plate set is really good for Rune Masters and Earth Mastery. Although I do think it's a strength set, so I guess I'll put an asterisk there for Rune Master. It does give skills to Rune Master, a couple of the pieces. But since you need strength for it, I mean, I do think that strength Rune Masters will be a thing, but it's so hard to not pay attention to that rune ability that gives you so much asinine intellect scaling. Anyway, no surprise here, this boss does fire damage in a lot of different and redundant ways. It looks like she has one shotgun ability though. It's the Earth Mastery. Oof, I don't even know what it's called because I've never used it before. But I guess it can kill you if you're in melee with her. Maybe just bait it out once to see how much it hurts with multiple projectiles. I doubt she's ever going to give you any trouble. But anyway, you need to come to this temple before you unlock the last place. If you try going into Surtur's area, you can't. It's blocked off. You have to come here first. in general, I'm actually really excited to play a Conqueror through here. Now, I haven't done it yet, mostly because I decided to make this video series, and, you know, it makes sense to play a Rune Master. I think if I played this, the reception would be, what the heck are you playing a Conqueror for? I love Conquerors. They're my favorite class by far. I think the progression on them is awesome, and I think they're absurdly powerful. And they scale at all parts of the game without needing any of these ridiculous benchmarks like, oh, you know, when I get full recharge, I'll be pretty strong. Well, that's a bit of a ridiculous benchmark. Conquerors don't have that stuff. Of course, he'll benefit from full recharge immensely, but he doesn't need it for his progression.
Stop here. You really are.
So guess what? This is a trick. It's Loki. All you need to do is to... If you click that portal, by the way, I think it rolls the credits. But if you don't, she'll attack you. You can see I used that scroll. I can't remember which one it was. It's the damage one, obviously, but I'm not sure what it's called. And it just devoured him. There's not much to that boss. He uses Turnian attack, but his staff changes every time. It's not always the same damage type. So it's not easy enough to just say, oh, I'll just, you know, swap to a ring that's his staff damage type. You'd have to do that in combat. So in general, I would say just have vitality resist and high elemental resists, which you should have down pat by Act 5 on any difficulty. So he's nothing to write home about. The rest of this area is just primal magma farming city. There's a couple mobs you have to worry about. They're sort of Grandmaster Archer 2.0 from Act 4. They're not quite as strong in the auto attack department, but they have some sort of spell that's high damaging. I find a lot of these mobs are pretty enjoyable to kill. I was actually pretty impressed with this final area. The quality has been a little bit up and down with Ragnarok. There was a team of very dedicated, you know, people who are obviously passionate about the game who built this act. And it's a definite welcome surprise. But the quality was not lacking here at all, I felt. It's a very cool looking area aesthetically. The animations with all these enemies, I mean, these Jotun are completely unique, right? And their death animation's very cool. The death animation on all the Asgard creatures is very cool. And they seem to fix a lot of the problems with release. There were a lot of monster infrequents that did nothing, so if you read that on some forums, you know, if your main concern is itemization and that's why you want to buy Ragnarok, it's all good. Take it from me, they fixed all the problems. Don't be concerned about anything you read on the forums. They've patched that stuff out. The itemization is the reason to buy Ragnarok. The act is good, but the build enabling features with all the new items and the update on the items and the increased level cap and that stuff, that's all going to affect the type of characters you can build and how strong they are. That's the exciting part. That's why I'm so tempted to make another Conqueror, because I want to see how it's changed. I want to see how that whole progression has changed, and I found so many items that I'd love to farm. You know, there's the Stonebinder Cuffs farm, now there's all the Black Steel and the Devegger set and all that stuff. There's the Ichthian shields and the Enhenir shields. There's that new slow res monster infrequent from those guys, the Valhall, whatever. I have the option of not farming a hollowed helm if I just want to use that new vitality helmet. And of course I got a nice bleed res swap chest piece in that Harness of Valhall that I talked about earlier. Those are all items that I'm going to be looking for on my Conqueror. Plus, I normally use Sabretooth most of the time, but there's a lot of new monster infrequent swords and things like that. They're all in that same farm spot with the Valkyries too. That place is just awesome. But anyway, with these Dark Elves, you can easily die to them, mostly because they're so small and there's a lot of these very tall walls. They can hide behind them. You won't even know they're fighting you. They have very fast projectile speed, so you won't know they're there. Or maybe you saw one of them and you're assuming that all that damage is from one. Well, it's usually there's two or three, you just don't see them. So you have to use your eyes a little bit better here. Maybe bait them away from these tight corridors. Remember, projectiles love tight corridors, so that will kill you fast. Try to LOS them, you know, if you're Earth Mastery, lay down an eruption near a door, and then LOS behind that door. That'll force them into the eruption. Stuff like that. You could do the same thing with Squall, whatever. As melee, you just LOS them and you attack them when they run to you. It's the same techniques as Grandmaster Archers, except there's slightly less manipulation of their AI in order to kill them. Now, we are looking for one more thing before we complete this area, and that's the black steel ingot. So we got the mead from the sheep in just before the Odin fight, and we got the mead of poetry in that horrible craggy area. Well, this is where you get the last quest item that you need for the legendary upgrade mechanic. So again, we're going to talk about how that works after we kill Surtur. But it's kind of a weird thing. It's what I was kind of hoping they would do is to allow you to upgrade epic and legendary items. I guess they thought that would be a little bit too powerful for this game. Honestly, even before Ragnarok, I thought monster infrequents were the way to go. It's usually that legendary items and epic items are only good if they tailor specifically to your character. But that's an opinion, that's not a fact, of course. So I was a little bit disappointed when they went this route, but it's kind of an interesting thing, nonetheless. And it doesn't bother me too much since I'm someone who uses monster infrequents. The fact that they're so limited, you can only upgrade one item per difficulty per character, by the way. That doesn't bother me because it's likely I'm only equipping a few of those type of items anyway, you know, epics and legendaries. And if I am equipping them, it means they're really good, which means they're worth upgrading. So I'm not too bothered by that system, but I know it bothers a lot of other people. So here's a primal magma. Gave me fire res. I'm debating on whether I want to use it. Of course, my bracers right now are blue bracers, but I still have my old pair of stone binders. What I tend to do is I farm a primal magma in normal mode, and I keep that for when I get my epic stone binders. By the way, they increased the dexterity requirement for stone binders. I think the legendary is like 408 or 428. That's pretty significant. You can see here I just restarted the game to maybe find another primal magma, but I talked myself out of it pretty quick. But anyway, because of that increased dexterity requirement, I think on a Rune Master you don't want to go beyond about 300 dexterity. I mean, it's up to you really, but I think the strength of a Rune Master is scaling intellect and using Rune Weapon to just make it absurd, right? And so I already have to get health because Rune Master gives so little health, so there's some stats gone. I already have to give some dexterity to equip gear, so there's more, and you need the DA. So what's left I really just want to dedicate to intellect. So I decided I'm going to stick with the epic stone binders. I recommend you at least take a consideration with the new requirements. Stats are pretty important in this game, much more important than in Grim Dawn. Frankly, I think if there was a stat like physique in this game that gave health and defensive ability and some other stuff, phys scaling, I think that would literally break the game. So stats they're different,
Nobody challenges Surtur.
and I think they're more important in terms of your consideration at least. So Surtur does fire and physical damage. He's not that crazy. That fire wave is not worth dodging, not on normal. This is the phase that's dangerous. Now you're going to see an ability in a bit where he puts a fire shield on himself. Now I don't know if that's a mixture of reflect and retaliate. I'm pretty sure there's a reflect component though, which is damage you deal dealt back to yourself. And even with maxed fire res, that reflected damage was huge. You can mitigate reflected damage by simply increasing the resistance to the type of damage you are attacking with. So I'm attacking with elemental, so I should have elemental resist in case of reflect. But I suspect some of that is also retaliate, maybe even physical retaliate. I don't know. It was a huge amount of damage. So it's pretty scary that I was fully mitigating elemental and that retaliate was so enormous. That's the only thing worth writing home about Surtur, really. The rest of it's just fire damage, dodge the throwy projectiles, he telegraphs everything, no problem. So now we're in Gladsheim. Super Gladsheim. All our friends are here. Unpronounceable Guy, Freya, Wodan.
Yours is a great deed, hero. I suppose the time has come for you to return to
it's time for me to
Nidhogg.
go.
I suppose.
So here's our victory lap. So how does this thing work? So once per difficulty per character, you can upgrade an epic or a legendary piece of gear. Now the upgrade works like this. It'll add a couple of stats, and it'll shuffle around, as in it'll It'll redetermine the numbers on a couple of other stats. You'll see me use it here. So once you reroll, it'll always add some affixes, so it's always worth it in that regard. But if you're relying on, say, a piece of armor to give you all res, like elemental res, just be aware that it could decrease that number. It could also increase that number, but in my case, you'll see that I lose about 3% elemental res. So you have to determine if what you gained was worth it. Now, I should have done it on my Fafnir's Bite, but I decided to go with my bracers, and you'll see the result. Also, you cannot, if you try to re-upgrade something you've already upgraded, it will just remove the stats that it gave you before, add 2 more stats, and then shuffle the same stats it shuffled before again. So it works as you would think it would work. It doesn't add more on top of the more you already got, it just re-rolls the item again. It also doesn't seem to always impact the native damage, so this thing has 83 armor right now, I think. Same with a weapon, that won't change. At least it doesn't change all the time. I don't think I remember seeing it change before. But just be aware it's not always best to use it on a weapon, for instance. So you can see I got armor and slow res. Now, I like slow res, so I was pretty happy about that, to be honest. I don't like armor, but, you know, whatever. But that's the legendary upgrade feature. It's a bit of a weird one. Sometimes you'll come away with a better item. Sometimes, for your character, it's objectively worse. So that's left a sour taste in some people's mouths. I like it. I don't mind the restriction on it at all. I think if it were too available, it would be a little bit too powerful. Anyway, so that's the series. I'm going to continue this in Epic and Legendary. Of course, those will be much quicker than normal mode. I think normal is the hardest part of the game. Epic and Legendary are much, much easier. A character relative to what he's fighting is much, much better. So if you want to stick around for those, we'll be doing some different things. You'll see how the acts change. You'll see the new enemies. You'll see how this character develops. I have high hopes for this character. I hope you've gained something from this series. I talked about most of the tricks I know. Of course, there's plenty of things that I didn't remember to put on the script or didn't think to say during the video and in this post-commentary. I'll be live streaming on Twitch TV. I'll put the link in the base of this video. So if you have any questions or anything like that, or you just want to hang out, play Titan Quest, then stop by. I'll also be playing some other games. I like Grim Dawn. I play aRPGs, other RPGs like cRPGs, Pillars of Eternity, things like that. So anyway, thanks for watching.